Welcome to Cancer and Peace. My name is Sean Stewart. I'm here with Peter Scalzo and his journal. And we've been going for a few weeks on this journal. And so it's been good. It's been really, really good just to see you process this with us on kind of a live basis. And for those who maybe, what is going on? This is not counseling, but I think the point of this is for you to enter into this dark night of the soul journey. You're expressing what you did how did you journey through one of the hardest experiences in your entire life, and to share that with a friend and to connect on this is, we've talked about it as like active listening. Mm-hmm. Anybody can do this with somebody who cares about them, who is willing to actively listen and process. So that's a bit of what we've been doing here. Mm-hmm. And it's a way of exploring your journey to peace, to coming through the dark night of the soul. And few people journey through the dark night of the soul and come out the other side without it being massively changed. And I think you would say that you've been massively changed from your own journey. Mm-hmm. And so we're going to keep going down this road until we complete this journal. And we're 2 weeks into this dark night of the soul journey where you had, one of maybe the largest surgery, at least to date at that time in your life. And you were going to be there for almost a month. And you're 2 weeks in, you're just past the halfway point when you're going to talk about where we're at today.
Yeah.
Anything you want to add?
Yeah, I mean, it's my 14th surgery, and the game changer for it is that metastatic cancer presented itself during this surgery, which we didn't know. And so there are 3 surgeons working, doing some new stuff they've never done before. And so I wake up in the devastation of, this is a new situation, and the stats say you have a 5% survival risk with this kind of metastatic cancer. And then bang, I'm in the doldrums, the devastation. How do I process it? So me going through my journal, I think, is a great exercise for me. The bottom line is I needed the journal to process what was going on at that time.
Yeah.
That's what God did. God impressed upon one of our buddies to bring me down an empty journal because I was stuck. And so then I grabbed that journal and began to process what was going on inside of me, emotionally, and then process spiritually, the whole bit. And that's what brought me out, brought light into the darkness, was this process of journaling and processing my thoughts and emotions. So it's very interesting to go back now and revisit it with someone who's really dragging me through it. Did I say dragging?
You did.
I'll say walking with me through it, Sean. So thank you for doing that. I do think active listening is very loving listening, because you don't come with your own agenda. You come to this whole thing with, okay, let's hear what Peter has to say. What is going on in him? What is, what was God doing in his life, which is very helpful for me.
So for all of us today, we're going to hear this cold in the sense that I have no idea what Peter's going to share, and we're all going to active listen on the program today. And I think this is good, though, for when you're, like, we talk a lot about how do you walk alongside somebody on a cancer journey. And I think there's a good aspect of this is, if you were going through this for the first time, to be able to just have somebody to listen without trying to tell you what you need to do, but just to interpret, hey, are you saying this? What do I need to understand? What is it that you're feeling? And really to get you to the bottom of clarity for yourself is what we're going to do here. And so we're going to get to do that as whoever's listening to this podcast, as well as I am for the first time. So this will be good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Not that it's the first time we've done this. We've been doing this for a few weeks, but that's the process we're going through. And it's, and for somebody to read their journal is not, many of us would be afraid to open our journals out of fear of what we're going to find or having that shared. And so you're trying to edit it, I know, but
edit it?
Yeah.
Well, yeah. I mean, one thing that begins to happen is I begin to entertain visitors. Guests begin to come. And actually name some of these guests, and some of them are cancer patients themselves. But I begin to sort of talk about these visits, and not in great detail, but just kind of mention who it was. And I'll put something like good visit, helpful visit, that sort of thing beside it. And I also started to detail some of the physical changes going on, such as whenever I had these surgeries, 3 of them I've had where they've been the biggies. They use a piece of the ileum intestine to create parts, bladder and ureter, and those things, revise it. And so what happens is they put the intestines back in. Apparently they take them out, put them on a table, and then put them back in. But my intestines don't like to be handled like that. So when they stuff them all back in there and then they say, okay, start working, mine chose not to work every time. So I had a long period of waiting. So it was nothing by mouth, usually an NG tube, gastric tube, and a gastric tube coming out of the stomach, so that because nothing was going through, and also nausea was a great part of this whole thing, and so I'm kind of like small victories, like like passing gas or something. I would have put that down, like, yay, those things that we take for granted were like huge victories for me, because it meant the intestines were beginning to open up, and I could get back to, I'm shocked with how many food ads we have on TV. But I really noticed it because I was not allowed to eat anything. So for 3 weeks, I'd be sitting there watching food ads.
Wow. Yeah.
The intestines would open up, and then I could start on a liquid diet, and then I could start eating solids. I remember the first time having an omelet after like a month, and it's like, oh my gosh, this is a first level of heaven or something, being able to eat this thing. But so I documented some of that stuff, but not as much. I was really wrestling with some of the greater issues going on inside of me, trying to reconcile things. And so like 14 days later,
2 weeks in, let's do it.
I have 2 entries here which really talk about the innocent suffering, and how I was trying to reconcile that. So the first entry is this: out of great love, God lets his beloved suffer. Example, his son, followers, etc., because of what it produces. This is James 1 stuff. Our task. What was I supposed to do? I put down not lose hope. And I defined hope by a joyful expectation rooted in God, but not lose that hope. 2, keep my eyes on Jesus. 3, give him glory and honor. And then recognize that he has a purpose in the suffering. I put, why does our sovereign Lord allow the innocent to suffer? I put, I don't know. He didn't answer Job either. Sometimes things are a mystery. We live in a fallen world, and God does not always give a reason. But I've put down, what is my response? It's to love people, serve them, and trust God.
Seems like quite a bit of difference between that and a few days in. So a lot of things have been going on inside of you, but these are all expressions of, I'm going to describe them as faith expressions. Mm-hmm. Is that a reasonable?
I think so. It's the recognition that, yes, God is real and God's in my life. Now, how do I reconcile some of the things that I'm feeling right now? And
the thing that jumps out to me is you're still in the hospital, largely incapacitated.
Yeah.
And you wrote about serving others. Mm-hmm. Where does that come from? Like, why, like, you're not even physically able to do something. Where does that thought process come from? Why write about that? That's the thing that just seems almost puzzling to me.
Yeah, I think it's I think it was more about that serving others has great value for the person who's actually serving.
and that value is?
It's I think it's others oriented. I think there's a release, there's a warmth. Like empathy brings about that when you can step into the shoes of another person and actually like to active listening. I think that's that gets you out of yourself and thinking about somebody else rather than yourself.
So is that an important ingredient for this dark night of the soul? Is to
I think so, yeah.
Because one of the things that's interesting is it feels like there's a contradiction, and we think about, maybe all great spiritual truths, there's a contradiction that sits in the midst of that. And the contradiction, I think, goes something like this, or at least it feels like it's in your journal here. Hey, to get to peace, I actually have to deeply delve into my real thoughts and feelings. I have to actually explore them, write them down, express them to God, even your anger, bitterness, resentment towards God. And then in this part of the journal now we see there needs to be an outward focus, and those two seem to be almost contradictory. Can you explain that, or does it make sense to you that shows up that way in your journal? Because they do seem so opposite each other. We talk a lot about the idea of navel gazing. Are you just navel gazing in one case, and you ultimately just have to get to others focused, or what is the tension that you see there, and how do you express it now that you've been through it?
I would say that I deeply feel that, I won't call it navel gazing, but I will call it that dive into myself and my suffering and my pain and processing it, sometimes well, sometimes not so well, but processing it, letting it bubble up, come out, surrendering it to Jesus, grabbing onto truths, makes me a more empathic person, makes me, because first of all, I've experienced my own pain and suffering, so I understand what it feels like, and it's hard, feels hard. But it also, because I've experienced some healing in that area, I'm able to come alongside another person and say, ooh, I know the pain and suffering hurts. I think you become a more empathic person.
That's really cool. So I'm going to now just dissect a little bit, just from you and I both follow Pete Scalzo's work in emotionally healthy spirituality, and he talks about this 6 steps of discipleship or journeying and growth with God. And after you get past this kind of service point, you hit the wall, the dark night of the soul. That's what you've gone through. And the next step is the journey inward. And so what we're really saying is that your wall drew you into a journey inward. You finally started writing your real thoughts, feelings, and emotions. And what you just said now to me is, it made me more empathic. And empathic meaning you have empathy with others. And so the interesting thing about that discipleship model or that growth model is the wall, the journey inward, and the very next step is the journey outward. And you're like, well, what do you mean the journey outward? But so when I'm willing to express and feel my own emotions for myself personally, I recognize that it allows me to feel other people's emotions too, and have there's a space there to connect. And you're just defining that as empathic in what you're experiencing, why you're writing this in your journal. And as you do that, then you write down that you have a desire to serve or to help others. And one of the ways you just described service is even listening is a way of serving. And so the last step is connection or ministry out of overflow. And so you've documented in your journal a pattern of what this really looks like. It's, I go in, I express myself, I process those emotions, I express my real feelings and understanding. I build the ability to feel and love again. And then out of love flows something that is greater than yourself. And that's really cool to see that show up in your journal. It's like this process. And because it looks like a contradiction up front, but
Yeah.
you're actually going through a process here, and that's what's
Yeah.
interesting.
And there's a verse about God, we can comfort others in the same way that God has brought us
Yes.
comfort. And so I think that brought me purpose, even though I was in a hospital bed. And I have written down here, certain people came to visit, and I read my journal to them.
I wanted to hear that. That's what I was
That I
interested.
had.
I was thinking the very same thing
At that point.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because you said early on that hey, you have people coming. So tell me, let's do that. That'll be.
Oh, you don't want me to do the second part of?
I don't know what's coming up. So
Yeah, so
if you think the second part's better to go into now, but
Well,
I do want to cross that bridge with
that
other people.
Same day that I wrote that, before I did another journal entry, I had a visit from good friends, Tim and Noel.
Yeah.
And Tim was a cancer patient.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was an opportunity for me to listen to what was going on with him, but also to share what was going on with me. And so I think when you're going through a period of pain and suffering, and you meet up with another person who's going through pain and suffering, you can share in that experience with each other. There's like, share your issues with those who share your issues. And Tim ended up, I went, as soon as I got out of the hospital, I went to see him. This is just triggering this memory that I had. And I went to their house, which was not far from my house. And they have a nice house. Went into their living room. Tim had throat cancer and he couldn't speak anymore. So he wrote down on a piece of paper, and he was an accountant type, which you probably know about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I know Tim too. So
yeah. Oh, okay. So he wrote down, how was it? And I said to him, the only thing I know how to do is to read my journal in full, which I did. And we all wept. And I think Tim passed maybe 1 to 2 weeks after that point. But I had no clue that when I was writing this journal that it could somehow minister to anyone else but me. I was just writing down my thoughts, my experiences, my processing, and yet they related to it so much that they wept. And I thought, wow, maybe God's done something in this pain. Maybe there's something here.
Yeah, that's amazing to think about. To think about the impact of you processing your own pain actually is the very thing that can be used to help others as they wade through theirs.
Yeah, and I think the point I'd like to make is, I'm not sitting here saying, look how strong I am. Wow, look what I did. I know that to be absolutely false. What I know to be is, in the depths of the misery that I was in, I chose Christ. But I didn't do any of the rescuing. My higher power did all that. So I'm humbled by this journal. It's not like these are some great thoughts. I mean, these are just my way of processing and God's way of speaking to me and my way of speaking back to him. A lot of times we think that all we should be doing is saying kind things to God, praise and all that, which is wonderful to say that. But I'm at a point where I say everything and anything to him.
Well, God's not fooled, right?
Yeah.
If you're saying kind things with your mouth or out loud for others to hear, but in your heart, you're angry, bitter, resentful, he knows that already.
Yeah.
I think he probably appreciates the honesty more than the show, so to speak. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm just going to finish this. And then in that same day, I put, life seems unfair for so many. Example, children, die, natural disasters, bombings, everything. And I put, there are Christians who have become atheists over this issue. How can an all-powerful, all-loving God allow a tsunami, for instance? How do you reconcile some of the Old Testament scriptures with an all-loving God? As some others have done, are we ready to become atheists over this issue and throw out, quote, the baby with the bathwater? And I put, what does the atheist get in the end?
Can I ask it's maybe just it's understanding your, because you wrote that in How Can We? What can you, before you run off with that entry, there's something there that I'm just exploring, and not because it has any meaning at all, but you were speaking in a different way as opposed, it wasn't personalized.
Yeah.
Why?
I don't know.
Will you read again? I just the process.
Well, it's just, I was saying life seems unfair for so many.
Mm-hmm.
And there's that question about, there are Christians who have become atheists over the issue of how can a all-loving, all-powerful God allow suffering, like a tsunami, I think had happened. And I was like, well, how do you reconcile, some of these scriptures with an all-loving God, especially the Old Testament, some things that happen in the Old Testament. And as I put, as some others have done, are we ready to become atheists over this issue? In other words, and throw out the baby with the bathwater. Like, just because I can't understand the issue of why do the innocent suffer, that's no reason for me to run away from my faith.
But aren't you, it feels like, aren't you actually reconciling your decision versus the big we, the others? Isn't that a bit of what you're wrestling with?
Tell me.
Others have come to a different conclusion than I.
Yeah, that's right.
It's kind of what
That's right. You're right.
Interacting on. And,
yes.
Aren't you pondering that a bit?
Yes.
It's kind of what's taking place here in all out. It's not that you have the proof. It's
right.
Others have come to a different conclusion, and they have reasons for their conclusion.
Yes. And
that's not where I'm at right now. And so you're pondering a bit of, in this journal, it feels to me like you're pondering that a bit. It's like, they have good reason for their decisions. There's tsunamis. Like, how can you explain that? Others have come to this. That's not where, I think what I hear in your writing, that's not where you're at. And so there's a bit of you're thinking about the other side of the issue here. There are multiple ways to look at what's going on right now. And one of those is that maybe there's not a God, and bad stuff happens because there maybe not even, if there is no God, maybe there isn't even bad stuff. It's just stuff. And I'm interpreting it as bad, but it's just stuff that's happening. And your conclusion seems to be different. And it feels like, again, this is a change in your position from where you were at. Not that you were an atheist on day 1, 2, 3, and 4, but that you at least were contemplating, maybe this God isn't good as what I thought he was.
I don't know if I'd go that far as contemplating that. I think I was more angry that what happened in this surgery wasn't what I thought would happen and what other Christians had said would happen. So, I don't know. Carry on. Go on. What were you saying?
Well, this might be an important distinction to think about here is, I think it's important because there's this, it's an idea about you had doubts when you started about something, and maybe knowing what you had doubts about is important to know and to explore. Because I don't know that I mean, I was just listening to what you're saying, and I hear anger represents, at least in some ways, unmet expectations. And so you had expectations about God that were not met in this process. And then when you have unmet expectations, clearly something about your relationship is different than what you thought. And that's why I go back. I wouldn't put you in the atheist camp because I don't think you were ever in a there's not a God point.
No.
But certainly what you believed about God, your expectations about God were different than the outcomes. And this was the process that you're walking through is some of the reconciliation of that. And so by this point in the time of the journal, you're now starting to say, well, I'm going to settle here, at least in this part of the journal. I don't know if it goes, we each in our lives, we go up and down. And I don't know that just because it's written down, that's what you believe per se, but you were at least expressing your feelings about it early on in that. And that's not a bad thing because it's part of the reconciliation process is expressing your feelings.
I think that's the helpful thing about a journal is you can be confused and frustrated or whatever and just write it down.
Yes.
Yeah, it's not graded and you don't have to come out on a certain position.
Yes.
You can just say what's happening inside of you.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's the point I'm really thinking about too, is that when I hear this, is not that this is your belief, but it's certainly what your body is telling you about a certain circumstance. So if you write down what your body is telling you, not necessarily, where your will and your heart are at, but at least your body is saying, hey, there's something here that's not right. And anger represented something to you in your emotions about unmet expectations.
Yeah, for sure.
And those could have been a lot at the people who had given you false information. And let's be clear about that. But it also represents probably a bit about a false belief about your expectations of that you wanted God to meet. And then what I have heard in this first couple of weeks is that it's not that God abandoned you. He wanted to show a different side of himself to you. And you could only experience that in this deep place of suffering and in deep need. And you recognize that you had needs that were deeper than the actual medical journey you were on, which is absolutely fascinating that God, in one sense, that you could get to the point where you could say, God loved me enough, because you're now talking about how God's loved you, to want to engage that part of your soul, of your actual being. That's a few people get to the place of actually recognizing the importance of that or willing to pay the cost of that. And so as you're wrestling with this thing of other people have come to the conclusion that there is no God, and they have become atheists, because that was what you wrote down. You're pondering this, that you've had an experience here. It's brought you to a different understanding. It's not fully understood, but you're pondering. Others have come over here. Something in your experience said to you, no, I'm loved in a way that I could never even understand.
Right.
That's what I hear in your journal.
Yeah. And I say it feels like if I did go over to this atheistic mindset, that I would be throwing out the baby with the bathwater.
Yes.
That's the phrase that I used.
Yes.
So it felt like I would be giving up something that's I know to be true and precious.
The most important part.
Yes, even though I don't understand. Yeah, completely.
Even though there's parts you don't like. 'Cause that's what it's saying. There's parts I do not like. The bathwater is dirty.
Right.
It's worth discarding in a sense.
Right.
But there's something very valuable is what I hear you expressing. The baby is, in this case, represents God himself. The most valuable part you don't want to throw out. But there's a part there that does all of us want to throw out, and that should be thrown out. And I think in this case, you're really talking about suffering.
Yeah.
With suffering, are you going to throw out the baby, or are you going to basically say, hey, I actually have to recognize that God is real, and the bathwater suffering is also real and there. And this is like such a reality moment in your journal. It's like you're saying both are real. Is the expression you're writing down. Whether you believe it or not, in a fullest sense, is what you're expressing right now. I love that, the baby in the bathwater analogy or
Boy, I'm glad I had you today to tell me what explain. Because I think that's accurate. I think I wouldn't call it a crossroads, but maybe a crossroads of just like, hey, I've been doing this now for so many days. What the heck? I get it how a person could come onto this side of the fence. But if I did that, I'd be throwing out the most important thing in my life. So I'm not going to go over to that side of the fence. I'm going to try to understand this bathwater.
This is really interesting because you're wrestling with the biggest questions of life right now in the dark. Like, what brings somebody to wrestle? It's so easy to intellectualize now that we're sitting on the couch, so forth afterwards. But what causes a person to really wrestle with the biggest questions in life? What question is bigger than God and suffering in a sense of hard to answer? It's why I think there is the book of Job in the Bible. It's like this is such a massive part of all of our own journey. And when you're in the thick of it, that's when you're forced to answer it. You weren't allowed to ignore the question. You were forced to answer this question.
Right. So, again, 2 weeks and a day later, you'll like this one. And this is how I put it. A thought. Christ loves, and I put you, I could put me, but Christ loves you more than you could ever know or understand. He desires relationship with you, his created person and child. Perfect union with him will be yours in heaven. There is no sin nature, and you are really present with him. Christ desires this relationship with you. It won't be praying, it will be face to face. No more reading scripture, it will be known. Therefore, the only reason why he has you on earth and in your earth suit is to be a kingdom dweller, a lover of people, and igniter of transformation. You're on this earth solely because your work is not finished. When it is, you will enjoy a perfect relationship with him on his turf, in his paradise.
So I had that original question back again.
Which one? What is it?
It's as if you're having an out-of-body experience. You're writing it to somebody as opposed to saying me.
Right.
Because when I write in my journal, I usually say, it's as if you're trying to convince yourself of this. These are truths.
Yeah.
And you're trying to convince yourself. What are you really feeling right there? Because if you'd have wrote, Christ loves me, and you're expressing the feelings that the me has, you said you.
Yeah.
In every case of that, what's going on with that? It feels like there's something there.
Anything more than, maybe I wrote it as like, this is a revelation I have for all of us kind of thing. You know what I mean? Not just for me.
Mm-hmm.
But I definitely personalized this. This is what I thought.
You felt that.
Yeah, I felt it.
And you felt that in what way? Where did you feel it, and how did it feel? Like what initiated you to get to that? Because this is such a far difference than the anger you're expressing.
Yeah.
So at 2 weeks in a day, what is the feeling that you had that says, hey, I really believe this now?
I think it's reconciling, why am I still on earth? Like, what's the purpose of being on earth?
Mm-hmm.
If the intimacy with Jesus will be greatest in heaven, and he desires that intimacy even more than he wants it even more than I do, because I'm imperfect, I'm sinful, then why doesn't he just take me so we can have perfect intimacy?
Mm-hmm.
And I said, well, because he has something for me to do here on earth still. He's not done with me here yet. Otherwise, I could be with him and we could be enjoying perfect intimacy right now, like all the people in heaven.
So purpose is something that's driving your mindset as you're thinking about this.
Purposes.
Was it, I guess what makes me wonder about what you're talking about there, was that something you needed to help you keep going? The purpose piece of that. I mean, if the reason why you should keep going is because because this love you have been made for a purpose, and that gives you hope to actually put effort into, because your will still had to put one foot in front of the other for the recovery journey, a willingness to try to do the things that the medical professionals were asking you to do. I mean, your girlfriend's a nurse, my wife's a nurse. This idea of non-compliance. So when in the medical profession, you've been given instructions, if the person won't take their medicine or they won't follow what the doctor or the medical professionals ask them to do, they're labeled as non-compliant.
I call it medical mutiny.
Medical mutiny is, yes, a good example. So my point is there's still a part of the will here that is important to your journey. And is there something here that I guess I hear this, and I'm curious if you feel this or not, is you connecting love from God to your purpose helps your will to take that next step and going forward. And so it was important for you to write this down so that you had the ability to take the next step because there was purpose. It wasn't meaninglessness.
Yeah, I think there was that gratitude and purpose were huge trail markers. Yeah. Those two places to get to help me to actually get up and want to do the recovery. Because I really didn't want to do it.
Yeah, that's because you expressed that earlier. That's the reason why this is fascinating.
Yeah, third time I had been gutted out, 14th surgery. Even my doctors were saying, this is a lot. And I was tired, exhausted, didn't want to do it anymore. And now I had a 5% survival chance. So it's like, what's the point?
That purpose piece that you're feeling inside of this, that you're expressing, is we've done entire podcasts on purpose and the importance of purpose.
Yep.
And I maybe just want to reiterate that, it's like everyone here was made for a purpose.
Mm-hmm.
And something I was thinking about when you were talking about Tim is that there's that window of time of you have the cancer and then people pass, let's say a week or two later, from a moment of suffering, and that window only has suffering. I thought about it a lot. It's like, what's the purpose of that window? Like, because if you can't see a long-term purpose, how do you wrestle with that? And in some ways, you're confronted with that even in your own journal. Was there hope that it would be long-term, or was there, you could even see purpose even in the short term?
Yeah. I mean, I think that one scripture was very meaningful to me, that even though the outer man is wasting away, the inner man is being renewed day by day. I felt like even though my body was failing, there was a unique work going on inside my spirit, soul work. So I did feel like there was still purpose going on. And
that purpose was enough.
Yeah.
Even without knowing other purpose.
Yeah.
Well, that's pretty cool to hear. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we are at time for, we've amazingly, that's another wrap for today, but thanks for sharing some more in your journal today. And we hope others have enjoyed, or just connected. Maybe enjoying is not even the right word, but are connecting with having Peter share his life at a level of detail that in one of the hardest moments of your life. We hope that you're connecting with that also, and just that has meaning to me, and we hope you're finding meaning. So thank you for listening today.
Thank you.